The Hinterkaifeck Murders, one of the most perplexing cases in German criminal history, occurred in 1922 on a small, isolated farmstead located between the towns of Ingolstadt and Schrobenhausen, Bavaria. The victims, 6 in total, were brutally bludgeoned to death in an attack that remains unsolved to this day. What separates this crime from other unsolved murders is not just the brutality of the act, but the strange circumstances surrounding it. Events that transpired both before and after the killings. This story takes place in an era marked by significant social and political unrest in post-World War I Germany, yet the factors surrounding Hinterkaifeck seem to transcend mere political or social motivations. Instead, the entire scenario raises more questions than answers, and presents an unsettling glimpse into human psychology, the unknown, and the eerie isolation of rural life. The Hinterkaifeck Farmstead. Hinterkaifeck was a modest farm consisting of a barn, a house, and a few smaller outbuildings. It was owned by Andreas Gruber, a 63-year-old farmer known to be domineering, harsh, and deeply mistrusted by his neighbors. Gruber lived on the farm with his 72-year-old wife, Cecilia, their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35, and Victoria's 2 children, Cecilia 7 and Joseph 2. The family had lived on this farm for years, isolated from much of the outside world, which, at the time, was not uncommon for farmers in rural Germany. Despite the farm's secluded location, the Gruber family was not entirely cut off from their neighbors. They attended church, Victoria sang in the choir, and the family employed a maid to help with household chores. However, they had a reputation for keeping to themselves and fostering a sense of distrust towards others. The most significant indication of the family's isolation, however, would be revealed in the eerie events leading up to the night of the murders. The unexplained occurrences before the murders. The first sign that something was amiss occurred a few months before the murders, when the Gruber's maid abruptly quit her job. She'd worked for the family for only a short period but left, citing the farm as haunted. According to the maid, she heard strange sounds, such as footsteps coming from the attic and unexplained voices, which deeply unnerved her. She told Andreas Gruber that she believed the house was haunted, and although Gruber dismissed her fears at the time, these stories would take on a chilling significance later. Soon after the maid left, more unsettling occurrences began to take place. In the days leading up to the murders, Andreas himself confided in neighbors about finding strange footprints in the snow leading from the forest toward the house, but none leading back. These tracks disturbed him because they suggested that someone had walked toward the house and possibly entered it, yet there was no evidence that this person had left. Despite his growing unease, Andreas never reported these findings to the authorities. He simply mentioned them to a few locals in passing, giving the impression that while he found them unusual, he wasn't deeply alarmed. In the same time frame, Andreas Gruber also found a strange newspaper in the house. The paper was from Munich, a city quite far from their rural location. Neither Andreas nor anyone else in the family subscribed to this newspaper, and no one could account for how it ended up in their home. Again, despite the unusual nature of these events, Andreas did not contact the police or investigate further. Another eerie incident occurred shortly before the murders. One of the family's house keys went missing. Given the remote location of the farm, and the fact that they seldom entertained visitors, this disappearance raised significant concern. But once again, Andreas Gruber did not act upon his growing suspicions. His reluctance to seek help might have been driven by the mistrust he had for others, or by a desire not to appear fearful or weak. On March 31st, 1922, all of these unsettling signs would culminate in one of the most violent and baffling crimes in Germany's history. The discovery of the crime. The last known sighting of the Gruber family occurred on the evening of March 31st, when young Cecilia was seen attending school. The next day, neighbors began to notice unusual signs at the Hinterkaifeck farm. Despite smoke rising from the chimney, indicating someone was home, no one from the family was seen going about their usual routines. The postman noted that the mail from the previous day had not been collected. Furthermore, the Gruber's absence from church on Sunday raised concerns, as they were regular attendees. 2 days later, on April 4th, neighbors grew increasingly uneasy. A mechanic named Albert Hoffner visited the farm to repair a piece of machinery and noted that the farm appeared eerily quiet. While he worked on the equipment for several hours, he saw no sign of the family. Unsettled by the silence but needing to complete his work, Hoffner left without further investigation. Later that same day, a group of concerned neighbors finally decided to enter the farm. What they found would shock them to their core. In the barn, 4 bodies were discovered hidden beneath hay. Andreas, his wife Kazilia, their daughter Victoria, and young Kazilia lay there, all brutally murdered with blows to the head. Upon entering the house, the neighbors found 2 more victims, 2-year-old Joseph and the family's new maid, Maria Baumgartner. They had been killed in a similar fashion. The scene was gruesome, with clear signs of a violent attack. Yet despite the sheer brutality, the arrangement of the bodies and the subsequent events suggested a chilling level of calculation and forethought by the perpetrator. The crime scene and the murders. When police arrived at the farm, they conducted a thorough investigation of the scene. The murders had clearly been carried out with a weapon that inflicted blunt force trauma. Forensic analysis later suggested the weapon to be a mattock, a type of farming tool that could cause such devastating injuries. The bodies of the 4 victims in the barn showed signs that they had been lured into the barn one by one, possibly by the perpetrator who then killed them as they entered. This method of killing, separating and eliminating the victims systematically, suggests that the attacker was either well acquainted with the family or had significant control over them during the attack. Inside the house, Josef was found dead in his crib, and the maid Maria had been killed in her bedroom, her first day on the job. Both had been attacked in their sleep, making them the easiest targets for the murderer. Despite the carnage, the crime scene showed some curious signs of activity after the murders were committed. The family's livestock had been fed, food from the kitchen had been consumed, and the house appeared as though someone had lived there for several days following the murders. Whoever the killer was, they had remained at Hinterkaifeck for some time, undisturbed. This revelation introduced one of the most baffling elements of the case. The idea that someone could live among the dead bodies for days, tending to the farm, feeding the animals, and eating meals in the house without raising immediate suspicion is highly unsettling. It implies a level of calm, control, and indifference that few could comprehend. This part of the story raises questions about the psychology of the perpetrator, whether they were an outsider who had no emotional connection to the family, or someone who knew them well and had a personal stake in the crime. The investigation. The Hinterkaifeck murders prompted an extensive investigation by local authorities, but despite their best efforts, they were unable to solve the case. The sheer number of unanswered questions and unusual details at the crime scene made it difficult to establish a clear motive or suspect. In a time before modern forensic science and criminal investigation techniques, the detectives were forced to rely on more rudimentary methods of investigation, such as questioning neighbors and examining the crime scene with limited technology. One of the early theories was that the murders were a robbery gone wrong. However, this theory was quickly dismissed when investigators found large sums of money still in the house. If robbery was the motive, the killer made no attempt to take any valuables. The lack of financial motive further deepened the mystery. Attention then turned toward the personal lives of the Gruber family. Andreas Gruber was known to be a harsh and difficult man, with rumors circulating that he had an incestuous relationship with his daughter Victoria. It was believed that Victoria's son Joseph was the product of this relationship, though the paternity of the child was never officially confirmed. Some speculated that this illicit relationship could have been a motive for the killings. However, without concrete evidence, this theory remained speculative at best. Another theory involved Victoria's relationship with a local man named Lorenz Schlittenbauer, who had once been romantically involved with her. Schlittenbauer had even claimed to be the father of Joseph, though this claim was disputed. Schlittenbauer's actions in the aftermath of the murders also raised suspicion. When he and other neighbors discovered the bodies, Schlittenbauer had behaved strangely. He reportedly acted with a level of familiarity toward the house and even moved the bodies, which was unusual for someone who had just stumbled upon such a gruesome scene. However, despite these odd behaviors, no solid evidence could link him to the crime. As the investigation progressed, more and more people were questioned, including former employees of the Gruber family, distant relatives and neighbors, but none of the leads resulted in any conclusive answers. Despite the efforts of local police, state investigators, and even private detectives hired by relatives of the victims, the case went cold. Theories and speculation. Over the decades, numerous theories have been proposed in an attempt to explain the Hinterkaifeck murders. While none of these theories have been definitively proven, they offer different perspectives on what might have happened. One popular theory is that the killer was someone who had been living in the house for some time before the murders took place. This would explain the strange occurrences leading up to the crime, the noises in the attic, the footprints in the snow, and the missing key. It's possible that the killer had been secretly living in the attic, watching the family and planning the attack for some time. This idea, while unsettling, could also explain why the killer was able to remain on the farm for several days after the murders without raising alarm. However, no concrete evidence was found to support this theory, and it remains speculative. Another theory suggests that the murders were committed by someone with a personal vendetta against the Gruber family, possibly related to Andreas's domineering personality or the incestuous relationship with Victoria. In a small rural community, such secrets would not have remained hidden for long, and it's possible that someone in the village harbored deep resentment toward the family. However, this theory also suffers from a lack of clear evidence. Some have suggested that the murders could have been the work of a drifter or a mentally ill individual who stumbled upon the farm and carried out the killings in a fit of madness. This would explain the seemingly senseless nature of the crime and the lack of a clear motive. However, the calculated way in which the bodies were hidden and the meticulous care taken of the farm in the days following the murders suggests that the perpetrator was not acting purely on impulse. Whoever committed the murders likely had a level of familiarity with the family and the farm. The Legacy of Hinterkaifeck. Despite numerous investigations, interviews, and forensic analyses, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved to this day. The case has become a part of criminal folklore in Germany, with each generation revisiting the case in the hope of uncovering new clues or insights. Advances in forensic technology, such as DNA analysis, have been applied to the case in recent years, but no definitive breakthroughs have been made. The unsolved nature of the crime, combined with the eerie circumstances surrounding it, has made the Hinterkaifeck murders a subject of fascination for true crime enthusiasts, historians, and even paranormal investigators. The story serves as a haunting reminder of how little we sometimes understand about human nature and the depths of violence that can lurk behind closed doors. In the years since the murders, the Hinterkaifeck farm has long been demolished, with no physical trace remaining of the grisly events that took place there. Yet the memory of what happened continues to endure in the minds of those who have studied the case. The unanswered questions and the unsettling details ensure that the Hinterkaifeck murders will remain a topic of intrigue and speculation for generations to come. As of today, the mystery of Hinterkaifeck is as deep and dark as ever. The silence of the fields surrounding the old farmstead is only broken by the distant echo of those who continue to ask who could have committed such a crime and why. In the end, the Hinterkaifeck murders offer more questions than answers, and those questions may never fully be resolved. Thank you for spending time with us through Spookscope today. Feel free to share your thoughts and theories in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and family. Until next time, my dear spooker, stay curious.